Hello, my name is Ilona, and in this video, in my series of Shadowwork, I want to continue talking about critical people. That was my last video, but this video is more about your inner critical person you carry with you. So I'm not really sure how you call that. I'm sure there's a word for that, but your inner critic, that's the word, your inner critic. And I also want to share some things I have experienced myself with critics and just dealing with critical things inside of ourselves. And what happened when I was growing up. I heard a lot of critical messages. But first, I just want to talk about my last video and just want to mention a few things. There were some people that thought that these were trolls. The messages I shared, well, I kind of feel when someone is a true troll or not. And in this case, actually, I've mentioned two messages from two different people. And one of them actually contacted me after watching the video. And he actually was very open. He was like, yeah, I think I understand that there's a lot of irritation from my side towards you. And there was a very open conversation. We still disagree with how we stand, how we see things. But there was respect. So obviously this person or this was not a troll. And I have a lot of respect for that. So if you're watching this video, thank you very much for that. A very respectful conversation. We do not have to agree to have respect for each other. And I think that's very important. There were some people that may think that these were like the first messages I've gotten, the first critical messages I've got. But I've been doing this almost 2 years. So my first video was from April 23rd, 2021. And obviously when you make videos, when you go public, so to speak, or blogs or whatever, there are people seeing it, you're going to get opinions and people seeing it differently. That is part of the game, so to speak. So if you really don't want to work with that, or you do not want to deal with that, you shouldn't upload video. So that's of course my responsibility completely. I fully understand that when I'm doing this, that can happen. So that's kind of part of the game. And usually I do not pay any attention to all these messages. These messages I just wanted to share because it was more of a larger point I wanted to make, a broader point I wanted to make about people that can be very critical. How do you deal with them, especially family, the celebrations are coming up. How do you deal with people that, try to dominate you, or maybe try to be in a way, very disrespectful way, try to cut you down, so to speak, verbally. How do you deal with that? So that really was the point of my video, and that the opinion of someone else is never, how do you say this? Never more important than your own opinion. We shouldn't place other people's opinions above our own. We should just look, of course, at the situation. If you, of course, ask someone's opinion and advice who knows a lot about a certain object or subject you want to know about, of course, it's very, important to open yourself up and to listen to that. But especially in family and emotional matters, trust your own opinion or your own truth and stick with that. Be open-minded, so listen to other people's perspective, but always check within yourself, does this resonate with me or not? Because that's the most important part. Someone else's opinion is not more important than your opinion. So I want to talk about the inner critic. The issue is that when I was growing up, I got a lot of messages that I was too blunt, I was too outspoken, I was too angry. I really, for a long time, kind of pushed away my energy in a way. I tried to be more softer. I tried to be more aware of what I was saying, especially with these messages. I've been bullied. When I was younger, when like 10 years old, I was bullied for like a year. And that really had a massive impact on my life because I felt like I was doing everything wrong, especially when you're being bullied. You don't understand why. There's obviously something wrong with you and you take that with you. So that message now becomes your own inner critic. And a lot of people get a lot of messages, and without even realizing, you start living by those messages. So it's possible that you still hear your father's voice or your mother's voice or someone else's voice saying something like, oh, you're awful, or you have to watch out for that, or you can do that. So sometimes even on an unconscious level, we still live by that. And that's the inner critic. And the inner critic is a lot more difficult to deal with than someone actually being critical outside of yourself, because then you can actually see it. Some people try to still deny things, of course, especially when they're in a relationship and this partner is really trying to put them down all the time. There are people that try to cover it up, also mostly from old patterns they picked up when they were growing up. Usually it's something that they used to in their parents. Maybe one of their parents was dominating and very disrespectful to the other parent. So they, on a certain level, think that that's normal behavior. But especially the inner critic is the most difficult one. And in my last video, at least in my Shadowwork video, I noticed that there were some reaction that showed that people thought that I was like defending myself. And it was very strange to me because I didn't feel like I was defending myself. But I know I have this very pushy energy with me. I can be very blunt. I can be very direct. I can be very in Dutch we would say, I'm not sure what the English word is, but be very in your face, so to speak, without me noticing this. And when I was growing up, especially after being bullied, and I became when I was 20 very sarcastic, and I also noticed that a lot of people sometimes, when they really didn't know me, they saw me for the first time, reacted with, oh, I don't like you. And I never really got that part. I was like, why are they immediately disliking me? I didn't get that, or I'm not saying anything, but it's the energy I was carrying around. I was carrying around a lot of anger with me, a lot of energy I wasn't using because I was suppressing it in a matter, trying to suppress that feisty attitude that I have. And of course I had my eating disorder, pushing things away. So especially when you have this inner critic, that can be very tough to deal with. And it's very important that you look at what's going on outside of yourself and understand that when you meet a lot of critical people, that is a reflection of what's going on inside of yourself. So it's very important that you can use really what's going on right now to change that, to change like, okay, what's going on inside of myself? Why am I always meeting people that try to belittle me or try to put me down, or maybe other things happening? Maybe you always attract people that are very negative. That has to do with something inside of yourself. And it doesn't automatically mean the same reflection. I've noticed that especially the more unconscious someone is, usually the reflection they see in their lives is a direct reflection. So a lot of people that are very negative themselves will attract dramatic people, negative people, because there's not much self-awareness from their side and from, of course, the people that they attract. But I've noticed, especially with people that are very self-aware, usually it doesn't mean that there's a direct reflection, but especially when you're highly sensitive and you just attract people that dominate you or just push your boundaries. That has to do with the fact that you need to stand up for your boundaries. So look at, especially with your, of course, your awareness, what's going on. And that part is, so if you meet a lot of people that are very critical of you, that means deep down inside, you're critical of yourself. And that can be very devastating because it sabotages how you live. So if you want to start something, you can already hear these voices. No, you're not going to make it. You're not going to get anywhere. This is not going to work out. So even before you start, you kind of already cut yourself down. So the inner critic is very important to understand that these are voices from maybe your parents, messages you've you heard when you were growing up. Like I've mentioned myself, I got messages there was something wrong with me, especially as a female. I shouldn't be so outspoken and shouldn't be so angry. And I actually got very depressed at a very young age because I kind of just shut down, especially after the bullying that really was very, very painful, because you feel like there's really something wrong with me. And that was the message that I internalized. So my inner critic kind of walked around with, yeah, there's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with you. So I would attract people that were telling me, there's something wrong with you, because that's the message I was carrying with me. So it's very important to look at your life right now if you want to work with shadow work. And also someone actually asked me lately, well, what does that really mean, shadow work? And I explained it like we have this energy around us. And when we grow up, something traumatic happens, messages we hear all the time, but then pieces of that. So if something happens, we get very angry, very upset, but there's no room for it. There is no room to really express ourselves or really feel through things. So this part of our energy is stuck, and we kind of put that in the refrigerator. So part of our energy we can't use anymore. That's now hurt or pain or anger, and sorry, we push that in the refrigerator. And because we don't realize that's part of our energy, we are attracting people, situations that connect with that pain, with that anger. And usually we don't understand the relationship. So when something like that happens again, we are hurt again. So there's another part of our energy pushed in the refrigerator. So we kind of just push all these things in these refrigerator and get a really big refrigerator. So we have this energy that we use for ourselves to create what feels right to us. It getting smaller and smaller, and that energy that's part of us in that refrigerator gets bigger and bigger, and we keep creating situations we don't fully understand, painful ones, anger, frustration, sadness. We don't understand. That's part of the refrigerator. So we have to open up the refrigerator. That's what shadow work is. Take it out, thaw it, feel it through, so that energy can become part of us again. So we can really start manifesting. We become that energy again. It will be fully available to us. But that energy is still there. So I also notice people that are saying, no, you need to focus on the positive. You shouldn't look at the bad things. They even mentioned, the messages I was using for the last video. You shouldn't give those people any attention. You shouldn't give those negative things any attention. And I think it's very important that you have to do shadow work. And shadow work is looking at that refrigerator, looking at those painful things that you encounter that happen inside of yourself. If you do not look at them, if you just keep focusing on the positive things because you're afraid, if I look at those negative things, I'm going to make them grow. They only grow if you avoid them, if you push something above, if you put something positive over them. If you don't work with them, then they'll grow. That's the issue. If you do not look at the negative side, you're actually going to make it grow because you're not focusing on it. You're pushing it aside, you're putting it back in the refrigerator. And the only chance to become balanced is by looking at those things, by looking at what's in the refrigerator, looking at things happening in your life. You can really just, what's going on in your life right now? What's going on work? Are there people triggering you in your family, in your love life, in maybe with your children? What's happening inside of you? Are there things happening now that trigger you, that hurt you, or do something? Then it's very important that you this is actually what I usually say about shadow work. Just isolate yourself, somewhere no one is going to bother you or interrupt you. You can lay down. I usually lay on my bed, or just sit down and feel, just visualize what happened. Something happened, something triggered you, maybe someone said something. Just visualize this and see where in your body does it hurt. And then you can breathe through that and feel that. Just feel it. You don't need to analyze it. You do not need to act on it. You can just feel that. And then you can kind of change it. It will transform. And of course, it depends on how deep the pain goes. Usually it will take some time when it's like an enormous fear or an anger. And that's, very important to take your time with that, because it goes very, very deep. And you have to understand that it's part of the healing process. But we need to look at both sides. There's also something I mentioned in my Dutch video I thought was very funny, that a while ago I did a therapeutic education. It was more of like the alternative education, but it was working with the inner child, with the lots of systematic work. It was coaching, things like that. So, and I was working in a group with I think we were with 7 people in total. And the last year there was one woman who refused to work with me, and I thought it was quite hilarious in a way. In a way it hurt, but that was part of my process as well at that time. But also I had to laugh at that, because you're in a therapeutic, education. This is what you want to do, as you want to become a therapist, obviously. A therapist, and then you're not dealing with someone in the group, which should be the safest part you can actually use to really see what's going on. And I wanted to work with her. I was open for that, but she just refused. And I thought it was in a way hilarious. I was like, you want to become a therapist, and you're already avoiding someone you could work with, that you could work things out. But like I've mentioned before, it had to do with myself. There were things I wasn't looking inside of myself with. This is a couple of years ago, I think 6 years ago. So these were things I needed to address at that moment. I didn't. So she was kind of a reflection of things I wasn't coping or dealing with. But in a way, it's of course, she has her own lessons in that. But I thought it was just hilarious. Just, you're in a therapeutical setting, there was no safer place than that to actually deal with things. And she decided not to deal with things. I also mentioned about my family, in my family, especially with women. And I'm not going to mention someone specific, but a lot of women in my family are not allowed to become angry or do not know how to deal with anger. And especially in that therapeutic session, we had a lot of systematic work. We would also, in systematic work, you would be an emotion or a person, they would use you as the energy for that specific, thing they wanted to look at. So it could be anger or strength, things like that. And usually I was the one ending up being anger or strength, because the other people in my group just couldn't open themselves up to that. That was very difficult for them to reach that level. I never had a problem with that. But like I've mentioned before, it is for me very important that I deal with that energy I have in me. One of the other people that I work with in my therapeutic, education, she actually mentioned, you have like a volcano inside of you that could erupt any moment. And I thought that was very suitable. I have this energy that I'm still working through it, but sometimes I seem more angry or maybe even more defensive than I actually am, because I have this energy. I still have to ground more, obviously, because I've been working for the last year all my energy, and especially with the consultations I do, I'm very direct. I'm very honest in a way, very blunt. I do not try, of course, to purposely hurt people, but I'm very clear on how I see things. And of course, the other person can decide what they're going to do with that. But I've noticed the more honest I am, how I see things, and the more direct I am, the better I deal with my own energies. But it's still a process I'm working on. But it's very interesting, and especially for a lot of women, to deal with their own power, because ultimately, if you cannot handle your anger, or you just don't get angry anymore, that says something about how you deal with power and if you can step into your power or not. I'd really like to leave it at this, and I hope to see you in another video. Bye.